It often feels like time is not on Taiwan's side. With each passing decade, this plucky little democracy of 24 million becomes less willing to continue pretending that it is a part of one China. But with each passing year, the 1.4 billion person colossus across the Taiwan Strait grows wealthier, and China's threats to stamp out Taiwanese self-determination by force become more credible. Today, with this video, we will reveal the greatest threat to Taiwan. It is not what you think it is. Unless you regularly watch my videos, in which case it'll probably be exactly what you expect it to be. We can quibble about why, but it's undeniable that the China of today is more aggressive and authoritarian than it has been at any point since the death of Mao almost 50 years ago. Hong Kong and Xinjiang are being crushed in ways that forcibly remind the world of all communist China's worst crimes. For 40 years, the country had been run by committee, or at least by more subtle and behind-the-scenes strongmen. Over the past decade, Xi Jinping has set himself up as a new Mao, just as a new generation of wolf warrior diplomats angrily assert Chinese superiority at every border and all over social media. But is all of this really a threat to Taiwan? It could be the exact opposite. Now that China has let the mask slip, the United States and the world may be losing interest in preserving the polite fiction that China and Taiwan are one country. China's behavior over the past 4 years may have made the United States more likely to defend Taiwan rather than less likely. China's new diplomatic profile might actually be helpful to Taiwanese independence rather than threatening. In Washington, D.C., defending Taiwan has become more of a priority. The Pentagon's loyal mouthpieces in U.S. media have started running scare pieces about Taiwanese security with greater and greater regularity. And the Pentagon's loyal spokesmen at this point are pretty much all of U.S. media, especially now that fewer and fewer organizations can afford real reporters to check the stories that the government tells us. Washington, D.C. is not wrong to be worried about Taiwan, but it is steering the conversation in some pretty ridiculous directions. Like ships, for instance. Seriously, the U.S. Navy wants more ships. Leaving aside my strong suspicion that the U.S. Coast Guard probably has more serious blue water capability than the Chinese Navy, expensive floating missile targets haven't been a useful part of warfighting for over a century. Take World War I, for example. The British and German public spent an obscene amount of money in the years before the Great War building up massive surface fleets they never really used much. The Battle of Jutland, or is it Jutland? Whatever. It was 2 days in 1916, and it was the only real engagement the British and German surface fleets had during the war. And they both hated it. Each side decided that they had too much money and prestige wrapped up in these white elephant navies to risk any of them in a real battle. Even a century ago, submarines and torpedoes were far more useful. In the greatest conflict the world had known to that point, the main combatant navies just sort of stared at each other nervously for 4.5 years. I wonder if we'd see something similar if a real war breaks out over Taiwan. I suspect that when the shooting starts, the U.S. aircraft carriers will go as far as they can in the other direction. There's a Bloomberg article by a retired U.S. Navy admiral this week that more or less confirms that suspicion if you read between the lines. I think the Chinese aircraft carriers would run away too. Those things are too expensive to risk in a fight. Let's talk a little more about aircraft carriers. 80 years ago, in World War II, aircraft carriers were very useful weapons of war. They also proved in a series of engagements how utterly useless the majority of those ships the Pentagon wants to build are. Aircraft carriers were super scary things 80 years ago. 80 years ago, the V-2 rocket was the peak of missile technology. If you aimed this thing at a city, it would hit the city more or less half the time. 80 years ago, if you wanted to throw a tube full of explosives at a target as small as an aircraft carrier, you needed a dude in a plane to carry it almost all the way there. The true capabilities of missile systems are closely guarded state secrets, but I wouldn't be that surprised if you can hit an aircraft carrier today with a missile launched from the other side of the planet. Missiles have been getting better for a long time. It's not just ships that are useless today. During the Vietnam War, literally hundreds of the highest technology U.S. planes were shot down by surface-to-air missiles. This is before digitization, before GPS, with imaging and sensor technology significantly less powerful than is currently present in your pocket. This massacre of U.S. planes was accomplished by Vietnam, a desperately poor country that had been fighting for its life for decades. Of course, Vietnam was heavily aided by the Soviet Union, but in retrospect, we have learned that the Soviet Union was also a pretty poor country, or at least far further outmatched by the U.S. back then than China is by the U.S. of today. And what's more, all of those U.S. jets got shot down over a battle space that was vastly larger than the one that will be contested in the Taiwan Strait. 50 years ago. Manned fighting and bombing planes will not be a factor in the fight for the Taiwan Strait. This should have been obvious 50 years ago. Surface ships will not be a factor in this fight either. That was obvious 100 years ago. If you believe the US government, there is all kinds of top secret stealth technology that makes these money pits still somehow useful in real fights. But these are the same folks who spent 20 years telling us our war in Afghanistan was just about to turn the corner and that the F-35 is a reliable plane that can do things. I mean, hey, maybe they are right and some of these platforms can safely send million-dollar missiles into the Taiwan Strait from 1,000 miles away. But why would you want to do that when you can definitely send 5 $200,000 missiles from Taiwan itself? Taiwanese land does not need to be manufactured. You don't need to transport fuel to it. It has a staggering 100% mission capability rating, and unlike the F-35, it does not cost $1.5 trillion. Which is a problem from Washington, D.C.'s perspective. Taiwan's problem is real, but the vast majority of the U.S. military-industrial complex's proposed solutions to the problem are not serious. Washington, D.C.'s solutions are about spending money for domestic political purposes. I am not some crank here. My conviction that ships and planes are useless for defending Taiwan was conventional wisdom in a different era of U.S. politics, the time before Trump. Before Trump, when Democrats cared more about health care than beating up on Russia, the Pentagon actually had to justify the amount of money it spent. Oil prices were higher before 2014, so our Gulf allies were able to fund a lot of terrorism for the Pentagon to counter. So much money went to countering these terrorists we were allied with that the Pentagon folks focused on China felt left out. So they tried to build fear about China by telling the story I've laid out in this video. It even got a fun acronym, A2AD, that was everywhere in defense circles 5 to 10 years ago. A2AD. Man, even when it comes to marketing, the Pentagon overpays for crap. A2AD stands for Anti-Access Area Denial, and there are sophisticated doctrines and analyses involved, but what it basically means is missiles, and lots of them. With a ton of time, ingenuity, technology, and money, you can build a plane or ship that can defend itself from almost any sort of missile, but really only one at a time. Or maybe it's 5 at a time. Like I said, these capabilities are classified, but nothing in modern physics is going to save our billion-dollar targets from 100 missiles at once. And that's what we're talking about in the Taiwan Strait now, at the very least. So the U.S. military-industrial complex stopped talking about A2AD for a couple reasons. After the whole Russia thing, the Democrats are now even bigger warmongers than the Republicans, so the Pentagon just straight up doesn't have to justify any of the money it spends anymore. Back in 2018, they were literally like, hey, Congress, we're going to take all this money you gave us to fight terrorism, and we're going to put it in this thing called great power competition. It's kind of dedicated to the idea that the world should look the way it looked in the run-up to World War I, and we're going to make it more competitive like that. And Congress was like, oh wow, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm sure that won't end up creating another World War I. Let's go great power competition. It's really amazing stuff. But there's another reason we stopped hearing about A2AD. You see, the whole point of Pentagon marketing is to scare the US public and get them to spend more money. But what the Pentagon missed, and a couple libertarian think tanks pointed out, is that A2AD is actually kind of reassuring. Like, here's the Taiwan Strait. In a war situation, it is impossible for any ship or plane to function here. But that's not just true of the US Navy. That's true of the Chinese Navy, too. How is China supposed to conquer Taiwan if it can't land a single troop? When folks started pointing that out, the marketing push behind A2AD kind of faded. A friend of mine recently pointed out that a missile is basically a metal tube with a bunch of explosives and some really, really expensive microchips. As the Warhawks have recently been very keen to point out, Taiwan is the headquarters of the world high-technology microchip industry. Iran, a very poor country, seems to have mastered missile technology. Well, if they can do that, then surely Taiwan can become the world leader in missile design and mass production. Taiwan is smaller than China, but it's playing defense. And that's the right side to be on in the world of A2AD. China is a lot bigger, though. Taiwan needs to be careful with its spending. It's not like the threat-free United States that can endlessly squander defense money on useless stuff because it helps congresspeople get votes. Taiwan actually faces a real threat, and Taiwan's dependence on the US military-industrial complex is killing it. US government protection is a good thing, but the political duty it comes with to buy billions of dollars of useless weapons from the United States is Taiwan's greatest weakness. If you peruse lists of what China buys, some of it is useful. There are already missiles being stockpiled on the island by US companies. But in that Bloomberg article, the US Navy Admiral basically admits the stuff we are selling to Taiwan isn't good enough to do the job. If Taiwan is serious about protecting itself, I hope it's reverse engineering the US defense company stuff and mass producing copies for much less money. Quantity is the name of the game here. So some of the stuff we are selling Taiwan is a useful starting point, but there are literally billions of dollars worth of stuff that Taiwan 100% does not need. Like tanks. Tanks! Seriously, tanks. $1.42 billion worth of Abrams tanks. I'm sure this purchase made some Michigan senators very happy, but Jesus. If we get to the point where there are enough Chinese soldiers on Taiwan to fight with 108 tanks, well, then it's over. Beijing has won, and it is time to start studying up on Xi Jinping thought. The tanks are the worst of it, but there's endless garbage on these lists. Ship refurbishing, fighter jets, and all kinds of crap that will not survive minute 15 of a war with China. Even worse, Japan seems to be about to switch its first line of defense, backing up Taiwan, to the F-35. Despite concerns that the F-35 isn't functional often enough to do the basic patrolling necessary. Taiwan has rightly won the world's admiration with its recent outperformance during the COVID crisis. The Taiwanese have built a beautiful culture and a strong democracy. Their security does depend to a large extent on the diplomatic and economic might of the United States. But the Taiwanese need to recognize that when it comes to a real peer-to-peer conflict, the United States lives in a money-spinning fantasy land. Taiwan can't afford to live there. Taiwan has the expertise and technology necessary to defend itself. It should prepare to do so. Or am I completely wrong about all of that? I think I've spent more time studying history and the political dynamics of the military-industrial complex than really anybody working for the US government, but I freely admit that I'm a novice when it comes to weapons systems. I'm eager to be corrected in the comments, and I will respond to those who weigh in. I'm eager to hear anything in the comments. Please do like, subscribe, comment, and share this widely. Thanks. Oh, and if I ever offend the YouTube gods, the only way to stay in touch will be through my email list. You can sign up here if you're interested. Thanks.